information. And then I was successfully able to get into router 2. So also what we could do is just a ping. Let's go ahead and try that from router 2's perspective. If I do a debug domain on router 2 and I go ahead and do a ping R1, what we should see here is it look up on router 3 how to get to router 1 and then respond back to router 2. And as you can see here, we were successful. So when I just did a ping to R1, instead of putting in the IP address, what happened is R2 sent this query to the DNS server, which is router 3 in this case. And as you can see here, with our debug command, we saw an incoming query for host R1. And what R3 did is looked up in its database, okay, here I do have a host entry in here for router 1. It responded back with the IP address to router 2 for router 1. So when I ping R1 on router 2, it looks it up from the DNS server to router 3. Router 3 responds back to router 2 with router 1's IP for its loopback interface. And we were successful in our ping here, 100%. So that's a basic look at how to set up DNS. One of your routers is a DNS server, and how you set up your clients to your server as well. Again, the configuration is pretty straightforward. On our client routers, we just had to specify, we had to point ourselves to the DNS server, which was in this case router 3. So we pointed to router 3's loopback 0 interface, and then we also had to specify a domain name here. In this case it was bowlercbtlabs.com. And then under the DNS server here on router 3, what we had to do is we had to enable it to be a DNS server, so we put in the command IP DNS server. And then we also had to build the host to IP database here. So we have here our host, which is R1, then we have our domain name, and then we have the IP address to resolve to. So when I tried to ping R1 on router 2, router 3 was able to resolve this host name with this correct IP address, and that's why we see the ping to router 1 as being successful. And then also we took a look at just putting in from router 1's view. If we just put in R2, we were able to resolve router 2 and actually telnet into it from router 1. Again, what happened here is the query went out to router 3 for R2. Router 3 has a host entry for router 2, and it matched R2 with its IP address here, which was the loopback on router 2, and router 1 was successfully able to telnet into router 2 by just using the host name of R2. And then of course the first thing we looked at was the IP domain lookup command, and how sometimes if you put in if you type in a word wrong, you'll see a translation occur, and that's because what you're trying to do is your router is automatically trying to resolve to a DNS server, the host name to IP address. And of course on the newer iOS and the newer the newer iOS's, this feature is enabled by default. So what I did was I went in there and showed you how to disable domain lookup, so that if you have a translation that you know is going to fail, and when you type in something, you misspell something, it's not going to take you 30 to 45 seconds before you are able to retype anything in the command line. So again, this is the DNS lab, how to create a DNS server on one of your routers, and how to set up your client routers to respond, I'm sorry, not to respond, but to query your DNS server, and how to get your DNS server to respond to your client's queries. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I hope you'll be with me with the next one. Thanks.